Conservative political commentary is a fascinating place. It's also absurdly well-funded. They really do say the darndest things, don't they?
There are angels and demons and supernatural forces, both good and evil, and they're fighting and they're working to defend and destroy us. And this is all...
So the obvious question we need to be asking ourselves is whether they actually believe the things that they are saying or whether it's just one big grift. In my humble opinion, the vast majority of them are grifters, obviously. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say about 80% of them are just doing it as a career, especially those people at the DailyWire. And that's not to excuse what these people are saying. At a certain point, it doesn't really matter whether or not you believe it. It really just matters the negative impact that you're having on civil society. But what is important to ask, and what I think is a fascinating question, is why does the DailyWire exist? For what purpose does it serve? How does Alex Jones, how does he have $1 million vitamin company? And why does Tim Pool have a bunch of swords on his wall? All of these questions and more will be answered. This video is basically an addendum to the last video on right-wing politics that I just got done putting out. Originally, this was going to be another chapter of this video, but I figured that the last chapter on Trump kind of wrapped the video up nicely, and the runtime was getting away from me, so I decided to just cut it from the video. I encourage you to go back and watch it because I think it's pretty good. But this video should make sense without having watched it previously. So.
Down the street with your red lips and funky.
For the longest time, Fox News was the only game in town when it came to conservative news. So if you wanted to be a conservative commentator, you basically needed to play ball with the Republican Party establishment. Unfortunately for conservatives, reality has a liberal bias, so you're going to have to bend reality a little bit to make an explicitly conservative channel, and Fox News was basically the best thing that they could come up with. The crazy thing about the founding of Fox News is how quickly it happened. Within a couple months, Rupert Murdoch was able to snap into existence a fully fledged news organization with 600 staffers in New York, as well as a satellite office in 9 different cities across 4 different countries. The newly minted organization was headed up by CEO Roger Ailes, who was previously a Republican media strategist, along with a whole host of other Republican operatives. By the 1980s, and certainly by the late 90s, Republicans had perfected the art of getting people to freak out about basically nothing. So when they chose one of their first hosts in O'Reilly, they immediately knew what he had to do in order to make sure that the audience was going to eat up everything that they had to serve.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Bill O'Reilly made his career in the 1990s and the early 2000s by positioning himself as an Irish Catholic populist. He was a man of the people. But in reality, he was one of the most out-of-touch elitists in all of network television. He was essentially a grifter. He fed his audience what they thought they wanted to hear, and he did it without a touch of irony for 10 plus years. Early on in his career, Tucker Carlson predicted the downfall of Bill, believing that the mask, the populist mask that he was trying to keep up, couldn't stay on forever.
And again, as I say, the shtick is sort of built on this perception that he is the character he plays. He is every man, this kind of, he's not right-wing, he's a populist. This kind of Irish Catholic populist fighting for you against the powers that be. And that's great as a shtick, but I'm just saying the moment that it's revealed not to be true, it's over. The moment he gets caught, slapping a flight attendant on the Concorde for not bringing his champagne fast enough, or barking at, one of his subordinates to take the, brown M&Ms out of my bowl and get me a bottle of Evian, or something like that. The second that makes page 6, it's over, right? Because the whole thing is predicated on the fact that he is who he says he is, and just nobody is that person, especially not someone who makes $1 million, or many millions a year.
He was operating under the impression that once people who watched him learned that he was a member of the ruling class that he was railing against every week, that they were basically going to lose his trust in Bill O'Reilly and he was going to lose his entire audience. But shockingly enough, when it did came out that he was this out-of-touch elitist, most people simply didn't care. What he didn't realize, what Tucker Carlson didn't realize at the time, was that people just wanted a person who was willing to feed them what they wanted to listen to, and to sustain the worldview that they had developed over the years. They didn't really care that he was an elitist. He was their elitist, and they loved him for that. In reality, most people who watched Bill probably knew that they were being lied to at some level, but they tuned in anyway because of the sense of being heard and being understood that this type of rhetoric provided for them. And so this is basically how the conservative populist grift really started. I think we can trace it back to the early success of Bill O'Reilly. What is really interesting, however, is how the internet would go on to shape the political discourse on the right. As I brought up in my full-length video, the entire conservative media apparatus was forced into a far-right shift after Facebook boomers essentially became radicalized in their little groups. Several different true populists, like Alex Jones and such, would end up sprouting out of this sort of soup of radical right-wing politics and gathered up huge audiences doing it. The voices were shifting so hard to the right that even the voices on Fox News were having a hard time keeping up with people like Alex Jones. This became a real problem for establishment Republicans who were beginning to feel their control over the media narrative slip. And this is basically where the Daily Wire and associated acts like Steven Crowder, PragerU, etc. entering the picture. I believe that these people are essentially a stopgap measure that was put in place to make sure that the elite golf course Republicans still had a little bit of control over the media narrative. The aesthetics of this whole operation are very important to me. I think they're very important to this conversation. Renegade Cult made a video a while back about how the set design and wardrobe choices of all of these conservative online media shows are basically the same. You know, they all have bricks in the background, they all have little sports collectibles, they all wear plaid and, you know, a very specific type of t-shirt. He argues that these set design choices are basically what the showrunners believe will appeal to a working class audience. So they're kind of really just trying to LARP as conservative populists, even though in reality they are big business conservatives who really care about conservative economic policies that they get through the Republican Party.
For the most part, however, these commentators fit neatly into a specific demographic, and they are shamelessly trying to appeal to that demographic as well. I say shamelessly because the set, costume, and talking points are all meant to give the audience the feeling that this commentator is one of them, only better educated like Ben Shapiro, or with a bigger platform like Dennis Prager. These commentators don't just sit behind the bricks, they themselves are the bricks, and the bricks are themselves. Look at Ben going to Home Depot to buy a single piece of wood. That's what a real man does. Steven Crowder has a gun on his desk, just in case someone from those other neighborhoods break in and try to steal his coffee mug. Looky here, it's Tucker Carlson dressed like he's Paul Bunyan, and he's broadcasting from a hunting lodge. What a stud.
So these big business conservatives, they can basically fund people to hold up sort of the aesthetics of populism on their shows, while still making sure that they hold back from going too far against the Republican establishment and sort of the establishment in general. So as an example, early into COVID-chan, Ben Shapiro was advocating for vaccines, and as the Republicans were flirting with trying to replace Trump with DeSantis as their nominee in 2024, his show was basically running defense for the Ron DeSantis campaign 24/7 for like 2 or 3 weeks. And I'm not saying this stuff is sort of a direct result from the orders that he gets from his donors, but I think sort of the shape-shifting speaks for itself. It's sort of this attempt to, you know, put on this populist aesthetic while still trying to get people to fall in line with the wishes of sort of Republican establishment. This post went viral on Twitter a little while back that accused the Daily Wire of being controlled opposition. Most people on the left said, you know, that's not possible. What are you guys talking about? They say, you know, super far right things. And, you know, the more I think about it, I think they are controlled opposition. I think it's the most obviously true statement in the world. And look at where PragerU and the Daily Wire get all their funding from. It's all from the, you know, Koch brother money, and it's sort of an assortment of other billionaire foundations, mostly from people who have their fortunes from the oil and gas industry. And the reason why these interest groups fund shows like the Daily Wire is that they basically want to groom a sort of malleable bloating bloc who sees every election as an existential moment in American history, right? They'll feed them sort of a populist aesthetic, they'll feed them a sort of anti-establishment aesthetic, but at the end of the day, the things that these people advocate for on the Daily Wire shows and such, they're fundamentally, you know, in line with establishment's economic policies and in line with establishment social priorities as well. This part is completely unsourced and is literally just my opinion, man. So take it with a grain of salt. But I think that the Daily Wire was formed as a direct result of the rise of Steve Bannon's Breitbart as a way to essentially replace him with a group of people that they had much more control over. Because if you look at the alt-right at the time, like right after the Trump presidency, this was when Steve Bannon was in the presidential cabinet. You know, you had a bunch of big things that sort of happened that were complete optics nightmares for Republicans. First of all, Charlottesville, there was a lot of neo-Nazi rallies just more broadly, and a bunch of really sort of unsavory parts of the American public felt galvanized to act in a more racist, violent fashion. So if you look at it and you're like, is the Daily Wire controlled opposition? Yes, they are controlled opposition because the Koch brothers and the Wilkses and a bunch of the other people who are funding these media organizations, these conservative media organizations, they are not wasting their money. They are putting forward a very big investment. They expect something in return. What they expect in return is a voting bloc that, again, feels like everything's existential, but is willing to support establishment Republican politicians. That's essentially the story of conservative media today as I see it. So, thank you very much for watching that video. I hope you liked it. Thank you to all the people who watched my last video, who left wonderful comments. Thank you to the people who left nasty comments. I don't care. You guys are going to want to stick around for the ride on this channel because the next video we got planned is on positive psychology in the workplace and this whole notion of workplace culture. It's going to be quite a banger. We're going to go into philosophy and psychology and business management stuff. It's going to be pretty nuts. I just got done finalizing the script. As far as I know, maybe I want to change a few things. You know, it's never really done, is it? But that's what we got going on. You're not going to want to miss it. Stay tuned to the channel. Gosh, thank you very much.